Turkey is preparing to head to the polls on Sunday in crucial parliamentary and presidential elections that could mark the end of Recep Tayyip Erdogan's rule. Polls show the main opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, in a slight lead. Kılıçdaroğlu, who's promised to release imprisoned opposition figures and restore media freedoms, was boosted by the surprise withdrawal of another candidate on Thursday. The close race could end more than 2 decades of Erdogan's divisive rule that has transformed Turkey, first as prime minister, then as president. DW's Turkey correspondent Julia Hahn took a look at the main concerns that are likely to drive voters.
Turkey without Recep Tayyip Erdogan. For many people here, that was long considered impossible. But soon, his days in office could be over. As more than 60 million voters prepare to head to the ballot box, let's look at the issues that could threaten the president's grip on power.
The most pressing concern for voters, something that's being felt by everyone here, is the cost of living crisis. Food prices, for example, have skyrocketed in recent years. And even many middle-class Turks say they find it harder and harder to afford a decent standard of living.
The value of the Turkish lira has plummeted, with inflation hitting 85% last October. That's the highest it's been in 25 years. Many blame the situation on Erdogan's unconventional economic policies. The president has also been criticized for his slow response to the devastating earthquakes that struck Turkey's southeast only 3 months ago. More than 50,000 people were killed. Experts say failure to enforce building codes is to blame for the high death toll, and that Erdogan's highly centralized system of power had weakened state institutions.
In the course of the 20 years that Erdogan has been in power, he has hollowed out the democratic system, critics say. He's placed party loyalists in key positions, cracked down on civil rights organizations, and brought most of the media under government control.
While Erdogan still enjoys the support of many religious conservatives, others say they are increasingly put off by his strongman rule. He also faces an unusually galvanized opposition. 6 very diverse parties, the Nation Alliance, have united behind one candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Their stated aim is to roll back the powers of the presidency, repair the ailing economy, and renew Turkish democracy.
In this election, the opposition is presenting voters with a much stronger alternative to Erdogan than ever before, with a very different vision for the country's future, one that appeals to a wider section of people here.
Combine that with the issues that are touching people's lives ahead of this election, and it makes a victory for Erdogan anything but certain.
Well, 2 days away from the first round of the presidential vote, I'm now joined by Harun Arman. He's a spokesperson for the AKP, the party of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Mr. Arman, welcome to DW. Now, this is the first time Mr. Erdogan enters an election trailing in the polls. How nervous is your party going into this vote?
First of all, Nico, let me just add my remarks regarding your package. I think your package has loaded a lot of accusations. I wouldn't have time to answer all of them, but let me just mark my disagreement. I have been campaigning in last 3 months with tens of thousands of AK Party volunteers who work day and night tirelessly. And let me add that I'm very proud to see that what we have delivered, what we have promised 5 years ago, and people are giving credit to that. And the rallies that we do in small rallies, and the rally that we did in Istanbul, historic high participation, 1.7 million people, with the highest that we had in AK Party.
Fair enough. We're not denying that you do have a strong supporter base. Let me interrupt you there. I'm very sorry, Mr. Arman.
If you just allow me to add this, it is actually the sign that people will give another term to President Erdogan and AK Party.
It is a sign that you do have a strong base still, but it is a fact that you are trailing in the polls. So how nervous are you going into this election?
Well, I don't know which polls you're referring to, but the polls that I've seen, and like I said, I've been on ground in the last 3 months.
That polls that put you 5 points behind Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu.
Well, the polls I've seen from different research groups are showing that President Erdogan is leading, and I believe that we will have in the first round win in this election. And like I said, I've been on ground in the last 3 months with tens of volunteers, tens of thousands of volunteers from AK Party, and the picture we see on ground is a lot different.
All right, let's talk about the picture on the ground, because Turkish citizens have been struggling with a crippling economic crisis. Inflation peaked last year at 86% and is currently still well over 40%. How can you, as a party under whose watch this unfolded, tell them that next term everything will be better?
Look, we are not immune from the global economic challenges. And as you know, the global pandemic crisis, Russia-Ukraine war, rocketed energy crisis have impacted all countries. In fact, Germany was seeing the inflation that the worst in the last 40 years. So we are not immune, and we accept these challenges. But inflation has dropped significantly in the last 6 months, 42%. And we have created 2 million jobs in the last year.
But what good is that if people still don't have enough money to put bread on the table?
We have gained the highest tourism and export income in the last 12 months, and we know that.
Fair enough. There's nobody denying that. There's nobody denying that, Mr. Aman. I just want to know what your plans are for fixing the economy.
Yeah, it's right. It is very important. If you allow me to at this point, Nicole. Our policy is to continue on investing on education, investing on innovation, technology, and we would know that they would pay off, and they are started to pay off. Turkey is the best recovering country among all these crises, and we continue to launch the projects that we had, the natural gas in North Sea, the Black Sea, and the nuclear power plant, the renewable energy plants we just launched in the last 6 months. I think all these projects will strengthen our economy, and people are believing that. So
they might, but also your president's, Mr. Erdogan's policies have been branded as unsustainable and unorthodox, to call it, for lack of a better word, that could end up harming the Turkish economy more than they have already done. I want to move on because under the current president, well, let's agree to disagree then. Turkey has withdrawn from the Istanbul Convention on Violence Against Women. Women's Day marches have been banned, and the president has repeatedly attacked the LGBTQ community. How is that the behavior of a democratic government?
Look, women's rights issue is one of the number one issue that we have for AK Party when it comes to human rights. And any women organization in Turkey can acknowledge that the biggest achievements on this issue was made under the AK Party ruling under the leadership of President Erdogan, and we will continue to do so. We will not let any rights that we have gained will going lower. We're committed to increase the standards. This is why President Erdogan and AK Party governments were actually considered champions of human rights developments in the last 20 years. Like many ethnic Kurds, for example, are free to speak their language today just because the laws that we passed.
Okay, I do believe that many women and many other members of minority groups in your country might beg to differ there. I do want to ask you, we don't have much time, but less than 2 weeks ago, Mr. Erdogan said, my people will not hand over this country to a president supported by the PKK, referring to the opposition leader there. Can you promise here and now that your party will respect the outcome of the democratic process?
Look, President Erdogan didn't say that. But of course, we will respect the decision of ballot boxes. I see that ballot boxes will give President Erdogan and AK Party a first round win. But whatever comes out as a decision of public, of course, we will respect that.
All right. I will take your word for that. Harun Arman, thank you so much for joining us on DW tonight.
You can take the word of Turkish people who support democracy in Turkey.
Let's dig deeper and bring in Sinan Ulgin. He's a former Turkish diplomat and director at Edamorg, a think tank based in Istanbul. Mr. Ulgin, welcome to the show. This is by all means a watershed moment for Turkey. In your opinion, what's at stake in Sunday's elections?
Well, these are very different visions that are competing. We have the Erdogan vision, which Turkey knows by and large for the past 20 years. So if Erdogan gets elected, it will essentially continue with regard to his set of policies, because justifiably he will believe that the new popular mandate has vindicated his policies. However, if Kılıçdaroğlu wins, it's a very different set of options, including democratic reforms at home, a return to conventional economics, and also a revitalization of Turkey's Western vocation. So in that sense, the choices are actually very stark.
Yeah, with Erdogan controlling 90% of the Turkish media and his crackdown of the opposition and dissent in general, it's hard to call these elections fair to begin with. But do you think they'll be free?
Yes, I think by and large they will be free. It is true that there are a number of elements that make this unfair. The government party is able to rely on state resources. Many of the state institutions tend to favor the government party when they rule. The media is another case. But ultimately, despite the unfairness of these elections, it will be by and large free. That's been the tradition in Turkey.
The head of the opposition, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, today accused Russia of interfering in the Turkish election. What do you make of that?
Well, it's quite a remarkable statement. I think that apart from the 2016 elections in the US, we haven't really heard a leader of a head of state or a would-be head of state accusing Russia with such clear language. So I assume that Kılıçdaroğlu has some evidence to back this. Interestingly, today, Erdogan protected Putin. And therefore, here as well, there's a very clear difference between the two leaders in terms of their perception of the Russian leader.
Mm-hmm. Putin and Erdogan go way back. Erdogan has been in power for 20 years now. Fears are that if he were to be defeated, he wouldn't go down without a fight. Will he respect the outcome of the democratic process if he loses?
He will respect the outcome of the democratic process. Turkey has a very long tradition of multi-party elections dating to 1946. And people know and care about the importance of the ballot box. There has been an example back in 2019 during the local elections, for instance, when the government challenged the outcome of the elections in Istanbul and forced a rerun. And in the first instance, the challenger, Ekrem İmamoğlu, the current mayor of Istanbul, had won by about 13,013 votes. And in the second round, within 6 weeks, the difference mushroomed to 850,000.
Yeah.
That's
but
just
the
a
AK party
demonstration
did, in that instance, pressure the courts to allow the rerun, didn't they? I want to move on because we don't have all that much time left. Turkey has been walking a very fine line with regards to the war in Ukraine. They famously brokered the Black Sea grain deal. Where would Kılıçdaroğlu stand on the matter of Ukraine?
On the matter of Ukraine, the Turkish policy would not change very much. Turkey has been supportive politically of Ukraine, but has also sought to retain a high-level engagement with Russia. That policy of calibration would not change with Kılıçdaroğlu. However, the relationship between the two leaders would change. I don't think that any other Turkish leader than Erdogan can have the same type of relationship with Putin. So that is bound to change.
What is your prediction for Sunday?
I think the opposition will win.
Off the bat, over 50%?
Yes, more likely than not. That we'll see, on Sunday with a thin margin, so a little bit above 50%. But that's now the more likely scenario.
All right. That was former Turkish diplomat Sinan Ülgen. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Özgür Ünlü here. He's with the German Marshall Fund's Ankara office. Thanks for being with us. Özgür, polls show that Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu has a good chance of beating Erdogan. What makes the opposition candidate an attractive alternative for Turkish voters?
Well, there are a number of factors that play their role. The first one is obviously the economic downturn. We can also say that the shrinking democratic space also led to particularly the young voters moving away from President Erdogan. Then perhaps the most important factor is the opposition's ability to unite, and in doing so, overcoming their cultural and ideological differences. And the main opposition party, CHP's replacement of ideological identity politics with more conciliatory politics played a role in this. And on the contrary, President Erdogan moved to the far right, aligning himself with the Nationalist Action Party, and he abandoned the center to the opposition. I believe these four factors play the main role.
OK, so multiple factors there, but the economy is definitely one. You mentioned that at the beginning. Turkey has serious economic problems. Inflation around 50%. In many other countries, that would be enough in itself to swing the vote against the incumbent. Why, then, is this election still so close?
Well, in most countries, actually, voters vote based on identity. Those voters that vote on performance and the economy is a small number. But when actually the competition is very tough and the margins are very small, those that vote on economic performance make a difference. So in the case of Turkey, President Erdogan has still a large support thanks to identity issues.
What does the media landscape look like in Turkey in the run-up to this election? What kind of coverage have the candidates been getting?
Well, this is a very interesting issue because it's often said that President Erdogan nowadays controls a majority of Turkish media, which is essentially correct. But it does not necessarily mean that a majority of Turkish citizens get their news from media outlets controlled by President Erdogan, because no matter how small the number of opposition media is, there is actually a big number of 50% of the society still get their news through these opposition-leaning channels. There are a few of them, but then a majority of Turkish citizens can access them. So I would say that to a large extent, President Erdogan and his rival Kılıçdaroğlu have an equal access to media.
If the opposition does manage to win this election, what sort of problems will Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu inherit from Erdogan?
Well, I mean, first of all, there will be societal problems. The Turkish society will remain highly polarized and divided. So that will remain to be one of Turkey's major problems. Then there will be a despair among Turkish citizens, including those that voted for Kılıçdaroğlu. After years of democratic downturn, shrinking democratic space, economic downturn, so it will be a society without too much hope. So the next president will need to give hope to the society, and it will also be an impoverished. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay, it will.
Sorry, we seem to be having some technical problems. Özgür, thank you very much for speaking with us. That was Özgür Ünlü from the German Marshall Fund's Ankara office.